Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this past week was filled with news about Apple maybe having the largest product launch in the recent history for the past few years, as well as we'll talk about that iPhone purple screen issue or pink screen issue, iOS 15.3, and more. This is your news update for the week of January 23rd, 2022. And Apple is once again the most popular smartphone brand in the world according to Canalys, and with Apple making up to 23% of the smartphones sold worldwide, and that's now followed by Samsung and then Xiaomi. So it looks like the most popular smartphone in the world is again running iOS. However, this can change year to year, but quite a few people like this new squared off design, and I imagine that helped with sales with their cameras and more. Also, if you were wanting to pick up a new MacBook Pro, they look like Apple is still having problems filling any sort of configuration beyond that of the base model. The base model can be had right now, but if you bump that up to maybe an M1 Max, it tells you it's pushing it out until March. So it looks like March is when you can get those, the M1 Max with 10 core. It looks like the base configuration is available, but anything beyond that is still hard to get. So that coming out, and then maybe with new products coming out, it could be a bit of a challenge to get the new one. So it looks like they're still having problems with that chip shortage. Now, this past week, Apple updated their education store requiring verification. In the past, if you went to that store, you could just purchase things sort of on an honor system that you worked in education. However, they added in a verification process, which just after 3 days, they removed it. So it looks like they may even add this back, or maybe they decided that was the wrong way to go. But if you're in education, you're a teacher or a student, you can get a discount. Otherwise, you should really use the regular store. But apparently it's a problem for some people where they weren't able to get that education discount. So it looks like they removed it. Maybe they'll add it in the future. If you live in France and you're buying a new iPhone, Apple has been required to include headphones, or rather a hands-free kit, to talk on the phone. This week, Apple will no longer have to do this as France changed the law so the environmental footprint of digital devices would be reduced, and since many just use maybe alternative AirPods, it looks like that makes a lot of sense. Now, those that wanted AirPods included or headphones included will just have to opt to buy them in the store if they really need them or don't have a separate pair. So that's something that they've only done in France for the past few years since they removed them everywhere else around the world. But since it was a law, they had to do that. Now they won't have to do it. As I mentioned in the iOS 15.3 RC What's New video, the U.S. Senate has approved a bill to go forward that would be an antitrust bill to force Apple to allow sideloading of apps outside of the App Store. Apple has long opposed that, saying it poses a security risk, and some people say that as far as being a developer, it's difficult sometimes to get your app into the store, and they want a third-party way to get in here. So maybe apps like Fortnite wouldn't have to go through the store. This bill is set to move forward. However, it is not 100% law yet and may have some changes by the time it's released. So it looks like if the bill were to pass, Apple has stated that it's concerned with iPhones having to deal with ransomware, malware, and scams. So that's always a concern, but you can sideload or install your own apps on a Mac. On an iPhone, it is a little bit different, but I'm curious what you think about this. Should Apple allow this or have to be allowed to allow sideloading of apps, or should they just stick with the App Store? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Now, if you're using WhatsApp and maybe you're using an Android phone and you want to switch to an iPhone, it's always been a bit of a pain to move all of your text or chats from WhatsApp over to an iPhone when you move over, unless you have a Samsung device. It looks like WhatsApp is working on software to allow that using the Switch to iPhone app that's available on Android phones. So in the future, it may be much easier if you have a non-Samsung device to move all of your texts and chats. So hopefully we see that. It makes it much nicer when you're switching from devices, since the majority of the world uses WhatsApp. In the United States, iMessage is the main thing, but everywhere else it looks like WhatsApp, and switching from that and bringing all of your contacts and everything else was a bit of a pain. Hopefully it makes it much easier. Now, iPhone is having an issue with software that Apple has acknowledged causes a purple display when the iPhone is locked or maybe having an issue. I've experienced this myself where it just goes to a purple display and then resprings. So I had it lock up in earlier betas this year where it would lock up, the screen would completely freeze, go to a purple or pinkish display, and then reboot. People have been having this on, and Apple has acknowledged this as a software bug. So we could expect an update, and maybe we'll even have an updated version of iOS 15.3 beyond what the RC version is to correct this problem. We haven't seen an RC2 yet, so maybe they'll just fix it in 15.3 or a future version, but at least they've acknowledged it for now. Now, 9 to 5 Mac wrote an opinion piece on saying that Apple should split up iOS to allow apps to be updated individually. Now, Android has done this for a while, and it's kind of nice. So when you want to switch maybe to iMessage, when you're using iMessage, if Apple wants to add a feature, they would just update the app individually. This makes a lot of sense in certain aspects, but not everything if it's tied directly to the OS. So maybe updating music to add more features, they would update it in the App Store. So 9 to 5 Mac seems to think they should do this. This would be a nice way to get features more rapidly. However, I'm not sure everybody would want this and having to constantly update your apps. I'm curious what you think about this as well, but it definitely could add for feature rollouts throughout the year instead of waiting for iOS 16 or iOS 17. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Now, another thing I mentioned in the iOS 15.3 RC video is that Apple has confirmed that if you're on iOS 14 versions or older versions, you'll no longer get iOS 14 versions as an option when you go to settings and go to software update. For a while, when iOS 15 came out, it looked like Apple was going to allow you to stay on iOS 14 and then they would provide regular security updates. That has been acknowledged as being sort of a false thing or something they've rolled back on, and instead what they're going to do is just provide iOS 15. Whether that has to do with staffing or just stability of iOS in general, maybe that's why they're doing it. But if you're on an iOS 14 device, since iOS 15 supports all of the same devices, you won't have an option for older versions. So it looks like you'll have to update or not have any updates at all. I was kind of hoping they'd let you roll back to different versions at some point, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the way it is. Now, as far as iOS 15.3, many people have been messaging me today asking when it's coming out. And based off year over year, I believe it'll come out on Tuesday or Wednesday. Last year, Apple released it on the 26th of January. So if you look at that, go back to January 26th, it was a Tuesday last year. So they released it on a Tuesday last year. We can expect maybe the 25th this year, where it would be tomorrow. So we could see it as soon as tomorrow or as late as Wednesday based off what they've done year over year, unless they find additional bugs, maybe that pink screen issue or purple screen issue. Maybe they'll patch that, push out an RC2 to see if it's working and maybe release it a little bit later. But I think we'll see it as soon as tomorrow, along with the watchOS 8.4 update, iPad, Mac, tvOS, and HomePod updates as well. After that, you can expect iOS 15.4 Beta 1 to start rolling out. Usually a day or two after the public release, they'll push out the first beta of the next version. They've done that for years, and then beta testers and developers can try that out and see how it goes with maybe some new features. But I wouldn't expect any major new features until iOS 16. And of course, as I hear more about that, I'll be sure to report on it. Now, as far as upcoming products, Apple's spring event is still not specified as far as a date goes, but March or April seems most likely based on year-over-year events. And at that event, you can expect a few different things: iPhone SE 5G, iPads Pro, and probably a new iMac. But that could be later on. But speaking of that event, new iPhone models and iPads have been spotted in the Eurasian database filings, according to Consomac. This happens every single time there's a new product coming out. It comes out in this Eurasian database first and then releases to the public. Typically before that launch happens, we'll see those in the database, and then we'll have the products within a couple months. So it looks like iPhones and iPads are going to get updated, probably an iPhone SE, maybe a new color of an iPhone 13 like we did last year with a purple iPhone 12, and some other things hopefully as well. And according to Mark Gurman, 2022 is set to be the widest array of new hardware products in its history. So you can expect quite a few things. Let me just run down what to expect this year. 4 new iPhone models, 3 new Apple Watch models with the Series 8, SE, and new rugged version, a yearly iPad refresh with a low-end release, updated iPads Pro, a 5th generation iPad Air, a MacBook Air refresh, a 13-inch or lower-end MacBook Pro refresh, new 27-inch or larger iMac, a new Mac Pro, and updated AirPods Pro 2. So all of those things are expected this year by the end of the year, and also maybe we'll see that VR or AR augmented reality headset before the end of the year as well, and hopefully a few surprises along the way. That is a ton of products, and so should make for a very busy year for reviewers like myself, but very exciting for new products and to see what Apple's going to do in the future. So we're looking forward to all of those things. As far as the iPhone SE, the upcoming iPhone SE 3rd generation, or SE plus 5G as people are now calling it, Ross Young has said that based on the production timeline of the manufacturing of the new phone, he believes it will launch in April. So we don't have a specific date until we get that spring event, but it looks like April. However, there's some new mixed information saying the iPhone SE may have Face ID and a notch, and I think quite a few people would be disappointed with this. The second generation still keeps Touch ID on the front. It would be nice maybe to move it to the power button like we have on the iPad Air, but it looks like maybe we could have a notch version, although other people are saying it will be identical in every way with just a chipset bump and maybe 5G. I hope we get something a little bit different, but Touch ID is something I think a lot of people appreciate about this phone, so I hope they keep it. Now, as far as iPhone 14, of course, there's not a whole lot of new information this week about it other than what I've already mentioned. Maybe I'll mention it in a separate video. And iPhone 15 is where we should see the first periscope zoom camera, according to Jeff Poo, who's an analyst. So 5 times optical zoom is what you can expect from a periscope zoom camera, but don't expect it this year, expect it next year. There are a ton of patents about it, and it makes a lot of sense. So Apple is still exploring an all-glass iPhone, according to patents found by Patently Apple. There are now 7 patents related to an all-glass iPhone and how it would work. So it looks like we could definitely get something like that in the future. In fact, I've heard for years that Apple's wanted to do that, and I've just never seen one. So maybe we'll see one in the future, although they'll have to obviously find ways to reduce damage to them if you drop them. When it comes to the Mac, Dylan DKT today on Twitter has said that the upcoming iMac, known as the iMac Pro, will have an even faster M1 Max chipset with up to a 12-core option. So a 12-core CPU instead of a 10-core, that could be even faster, and maybe some bumped up GPU specs than from what we've already heard. So it looks like we could have that, and hopefully we see that within a few months. With iPad, there's additional news saying that Apple is still considering OLED displays. I've always thought this was a bit odd since we have mini LED and Apple keeps pushing that. There are advantages to mini LED, but there's also disadvantages. The main advantage is brightness and color accuracy, and then maybe they'll move to micro LED where that would be the panel itself. That's the future technology. So for them to move from maybe LCD to mini LED, then to OLED, then back to maybe micro LED doesn't make a lot of sense. So maybe they're just exploring this, but it looks like LG is working to supply Apple with OLED displays, maybe for some future product we're not aware of. Either way, it looks like they're working on that. And so that's everything in the news this past week, as well as when to expect iOS 15.3. I'm looking forward to all of those products, mostly to maybe an iMac Pro and Mac Pro, but let me know what you're looking most forward to in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.